Some battles do not unfold on warfields, but in the glittering living rooms of the wealthy. In those places, a man wields power to crush, while a woman must learn to rise from the ashes of contempt. Yet within that same space, love, resilience, and two children's voices transform humiliation into victory. This isn't merely a story of a broken marriage, it's a woman's journey reclaiming her true worth, building her fortress from love and grace. Richard Calloway stood in his glass-walled office on the 42nd floor, surveying Manhattan like a general taking stock of his battlefield. The city stretched out beneath the late afternoon light. The towers gleamed with a brilliant golden sheen reflected in the glass. The sounds of engines, horns, and voices blended into a familiar, restless symphony. To Richard, those sounds no longer spoke of life. They were the heartbeat of his empire. On his wrist, a $20,000 Patek Philippe glinted like proof of his dominion. The cold metal against his skin reminded him of his difference, not one of the scrambling masses below, but the master of the game. On his desk lay the thick contract for a $50 million deal, pages spread open, the signatures of his partners lined up like marks of surrender. Yet Richard felt empty while his subordinates were excited and the press prepared their praises. The thrill of victory had faded into a pale shadow. Something had haunted him for 3 years now, a strange silence, as if someone were mocking him without uttering a word. That someone was Monica Alvarez. Her name cut through his mind like a scratch on glass. He remembered the night 3 years ago when he'd walked out of the Calloway estate, suitcase in hand. Monica had stood at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her face, but with that infuriating defiance still in her eyes. He'd been certain that within months she would crawl back, beg him to take her in, plead for their children's future. But 3 years passed, no calls, no letters, no signs of struggle. Her silence was the most profound betrayal. "Sir," came the careful voice of Chloe Grant, his assistant, from the doorway. "The guest list for tomorrow's gala is finalized. Would you like to review it one last time?" Richard turned, a cold smile curling on his lips. Perfect timing. "I want to add one more name." He took the Mont Blanc pen from his breast pocket, the one he reserved for signing monumental deals, and wrote, in deliberate strokes, "Monica Alvarez." The name slashed across the cream paper like a blade. Richard studied it, eyes gleaming with sinister satisfaction. "This," he said, handing the list to Chloe, "will be delivered by hand, in a gold-embossed envelope. And make sure it includes my note. I hope you can come, Monica. It would mean a lot to see how you've been." Richard Calloway. Chloe hesitated. She had worked for Richard long enough to know that the light in his eyes was never one of kindness. But she also knew her place to execute, not to question. "Yes, sir." When the door shut, Richard turned back to the glass wall. He imagined Monica's arrival, a cheap dress bought on sale, a strained smile, 2 children clinging to her because she couldn't find a sitter. He would seat her at the front, under the brightest lights and the sharpest cameras. During his speech about the resilience of single mothers, he would call her name and make her stand before the crowd. They would applaud her out of pity, and he would smile like a benevolent benefactor. A perfect performance. Richard breathed deeply, letting the fantasy wash over him like a drug. The feeling of control of shaping another person's image was more intoxicating than any deal he'd ever closed. Outside, Manhattan glowed like treasure in his hands. But Richard knew the real victory wasn't in numbers on paper, it was in watching the one who had dared to defy him kneel. Night fell over the city, neon lights flaring and reflecting across his office windows like 1,000 eyes watching. He switched off the lights, letting darkness envelop the room, leaving only the city's glow beyond the glass. He felt like a ruler surveying his kingdom in that half-light, preparing a meticulously crafted humiliation. He poured himself a glass of rare Macallan scotch and sank into an Italian leather chair. Each fiery sip reminded him he was alive, still in control. His mind drifted back to the days at the Calloway estate, that grand Long Island mansion he'd once believed symbolized power and family. Monica had been barely past 20 then, her eyes alight with passion as she talked about her architectural designs. But to Richard, it had all been childish nonsense. He had told her plainly, "Your architecture won't feed a family. Be grateful you married me." He remembered how she'd gone silent, biting her lip but saying nothing. She kept working despite his scorn and grip on every dollar. When the marriage finally collapsed, he had spat one last line. "Without me, you're nothing but a poor immigrant girl playing designer in a rundown apartment." The memory didn't shame him, it thrilled him. He was certain Monica had suffered. What unsettled him was her silence. No pleading call, no desperate letter. She had vanished from his world as if she'd never existed. "No one ignores Richard Calloway," he muttered, setting his glass on the ebony desk. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Chloe peeked in, hesitant. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to see the list of confirmed reporters. We've got people from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal." Richard's lips curved. "Good. The more, the merrier. I want every major outlet to witness that moment." Chloe nodded, turning to leave, but Richard stopped her. "You have something else to say?" She hesitated, then babbled. "Are you sure you want to invite Monica? I think things might not go the way you expect." The air thickened. Richard stared at her, his blue eyes hard as steel. "Your job is to send the invitation, not predict the outcome." Chloe lowered her head and closed the door. Richard walked to a glass cabinet filled with trophies of his success: Swiss watches, golf awards, and photos with politicians. Amid them lay a small frame turned face down, a family photo with Monica and their 2 young children. He picked it up, staring at her radiant smile. That smile stirred both desire and anger. "Let's see if you're still smiling when you stand under my lights," he growled, flipping the photo back down. The gala played out in detail in his mind. Guests in tuxedos and dazzling gowns, glasses of wine shimmering beneath crystal chandeliers, jazz echoing off marble floors. When he took the stage, his commanding voice would fill the hall. Monica, in her modest dress, would rise before hundreds of eyes. He would tell the inspiring story of a woman who had walked away from a mansion to struggle alone, then pat her shoulder like a savior. The crowd would pity her and admire him. And, no matter how proud, Monica would have to endure it in silence. Richard smiled to himself, the scotch burning in his veins like fire. It wasn't a simple pleasure, it was power, pure and consuming, the exultation of watching someone break. Outside, the city pulsed ambitious, ruthless, alive. Richard Calloway believed that tomorrow would redefine Monica's life, and once again prove that he alone held the power to decide it. On the other side of the city, the late afternoon light streamed through tall, dusty windows in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, falling across unfinished architectural sketches. Monica Alvarez stood before a large drafting board covered in tracing paper, her pencil strokes strong and decisive. The sound of graphite gliding over paper mingled with the clatter of keyboards from her young colleagues and the steady hum of an A0 printer in the corner. The space was different from Richard's gleaming glass office in Manhattan. This wasn't an empire of wealth, but a place built on effort, creativity, and persistence. Monica had chosen it after leaving the Calloway estate, a rough, concrete, ceilinged studio with peeling paint on the walls. But it was here she had built Alvarez Design, a small architecture firm devoted to community housing and sustainable projects. On her cluttered desk, an old laptop whirred beside a chipped box of pencils and a small photo frame showing 2 identical boys, Daniel and Lucas, grinning in blue baseball uniforms, holding worn gloves. That picture was her anchor on the nights when exhaustion nearly broke her. "Monica," came the voice of her assistant and best friend, Tasha Coleman, from the doorway. She stepped in holding a golden envelope that shimmered under the light. "This just came for you." The courier said it was urgent. The guy was in a suit and had a black car out front. "I think." Monica looked up and her heart sank. The embossed gold, the slanted, elegant handwriting, she knew it too well. Tasha placed the envelope on the desk, her expression uneasy. "Want me to open it?" Monica shook her head. Her hand trembled slightly as she ran her fingers over the thick paper, hesitated, then tore it open. A weighty card slipped out, the print crisp and formal. "The Calloway Foundation cordially invites Monica Alvarez to the annual gala." But it was the handwritten line at the bottom that stole her breath. "Hope you can come, Monica. It would mean a lot to see how you've been. Richard Calloway." She let the card fall. It landed on the floor like a wounded bird. The past surged back in a sharp wave that almost knocked her off her feet. She was 29 again, standing in the grand hall of Calloway estate. Richard is packing his suitcases, his voice cold and cutting. "You'll never make it. You're just a cheap immigrant girl who got lucky marrying me. Without me, you're nothing." Those words, after all these years, still sliced through her. Monica gripped the edge of the table for balance, her vision blurring. "Monica, are you okay?" Tasha hurried forward, alarmed. Before Monica could answer, the door opening echoed across the concrete floor. She didn't need to look, she knew that stride. Ethan Whitaker, always walking with quiet confidence, a mix of steadiness and warmth. "I brought lunch." His voice came, rich and easy. "And real coffee, none of that office sludge you keep torturing yourself with." He stopped when he saw her pale face. In 2 steps, he was beside her, a hand on her shoulder, gently turning her around. His deep brown eyes searched hers. "What happened?" he asked, his calm tone edged with restrained anger. Monica pointed to the card on the floor. Ethan bent down, picked it up, read it, and his jaw tightened. His other hand curled into a fist. "That bastard," he muttered, voice low, metallic with fury. "He's up to something." "It's just a gala," Monica said weakly, forcing a small smile. Maybe he actually wants to make peace?" Ethan looked up, eyes blazing. "Monica, that man spent years humiliating you, breaking your spirit. He abandoned you and the boys. You really think he's changed overnight?" She bit her lip, tears trembling in her lashes. "It's just that, seeing his handwriting brought everything back. The things he said, the way he looked at me. Sometimes I'm scared he was right. Scared. I'm just pretending to have made it." Ethan lifted her chin, his thumb brushing away a tear. His voice softened, each word grounding her. "Listen to me. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see the woman who designed the Calloway Cultural Center, a place that brought a whole neighborhood together. The woman who turned Brooklyn Green Homes into a national model for sustainable living. The woman who built this firm from nothing now gives a livelihood to dozens of people." He leaned closer, his voice gentler still. "And I see a mother who raised Daniel and Lucas, 2 bright, kind boys, alone. You are stronger than anything he ever said." Monica trembled, but this time from emotion. She buried her face against his shoulder, letting his warmth dissolve the chill of old memories. After a long silence, she straightened. Ethan's gaze was steady, resolute. "So," he asked quietly, "what do you want to do? Ignore it or face it?" Monica looked at the photo of her sons, then back at him. In his eyes, she saw not pity but unwavering protection. For the first time in years, she thought maybe she didn't have to keep running. Laughter rang down from the wooden loft stairs above. Daniel and Lucas burst down, sneakers thumping, faces bright. Daniel clutched a half-built Lego robot. Lucas carried a small basketball. "Mama," Lucas called, his eyes lighting up. "Did Mr. Ethan bring donuts?" Ethan smiled, holding up a paper bag from their favorite cafe. "Guess what chocolate for Lucas? Vanilla for Daniel." The boys cheered and ran to him, wrapping their arms around his legs. Monica watched, her heart twisting with a tender ache, familiar yet always new. When Lucas was happily munching, Daniel noticed his mother's strained face. Setting his donut down, he asked softly, "Mama, what's wrong?" Monica knelt beside him, smoothing his dark hair. "It's nothing, honey. Someone just sent Mama an invitation to a party." "Was it him?" Daniel's voice sharpened, startlingly perceptive for an 8-year-old. "Did he make you sad again?" Monica froze. She had never spoken ill of Richard before them, but children always see more than we think. "It's okay," she whispered with a faint smile. "Mama's fine." Ethan crouched beside them, resting a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Listen, guys. Sometimes grown-ups say or do hurtful things. But what matters is that the family sticks together. Your mama is the strongest person I know." Daniel studied him for a moment, then nodded. Lucas, chocolate smudging his cheek, chimed in. "If Mama goes somewhere, we go too. Nobody gets to make her sad again." Monica laughed through her tears. Their innocence became her strength. She pulled them close, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair. Across from her, Ethan watched quietly, determination in his eyes. "Monica," he said, "you're not going alone. If you decide to go, we'll all go with you, not to prove anything to him, but to remind you he has no power over you anymore." The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Monica looked at the three faces before her, two small and full of courage, one steadfast and strong. Something fierce and steady rose within her. "I want to go," she said at last, her voice low but sure, "not to show him anything, but to show myself that I'm not afraid anymore." A proud smile spread across Ethan's face, not of triumph, but of quiet admiration. He took her hand. "Then we'll go. And trust me, Monica, this time he'll be forced to bow." After Daniel and Lucas were asleep that night, Monica sat alone on the balcony. Brooklyn shimmered before her, Manhattan glowing in the distance. On the table beside her, Richard's invitation caught the light of a small lamp. She picked it up again, her hands steady now. She thought of those early days after leaving Calloway estate, alone, with two small children, her savings nearly gone, and friends drifting away out of fear of Richard. There had been nights she'd sat in the bathroom, trembling, ready to give up until the sound of Daniel's hungry cry and Lucas's tiny hand clutching her shirt pulled her back. She rebuilt her life step by step. Small freelance projects in Harlem, sleepless nights, slow trust earned. Brooklyn Green Homes had changed everything, a living, breathing community where children had safe places to play, elders tended rooftop gardens, and single mothers found shelter and pride. She had done it all without Richard. Monica tightened her grip on the invitation, then set it back down. A quiet certainty filled her. The gala was no longer his trap. It was her moment to prove to herself and her boys that the past no longer owned them. In the dark, Ethan came out, draping a blanket over her shoulders. He sat beside her, silent for a while, then said softly, "I know what you're thinking. Am I scared?" she asked quietly. "No," he said, eyes on the skyline. "Just proud. Because facing your fear, that's the real victory." Monica leaned against him. The city hummed beyond them, relentless and alive, but she felt peace for the first time in years. Whatever awaited her at the Calloway estate, she knew she wouldn't be walking into it alone. 2 years earlier, Brooklyn was drenched in rain. A summer storm beat against the windows of the old warehouse, where Monica had just opened her Alvarez design studio. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered, their reflections rippling across the damp concrete floor. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. Everyone else had gone home. Only Monica remained, bent over her drafting table. The plans before her were for Riverside Housing, the first public housing project she had landed since her divorce. It was a minor contract, but to Monica, it meant survival, proof that she could stand alone. Yet the numbers wouldn't balance, deliveries were delayed, and she knew one small mistake could make her client pull out entirely. Outside, rain lashed the windows. Monica rubbed her eyes, pressing her temples, wondering if Richard had been right all along, that she was deluding herself with a dream. A sudden knock at the door broke the silence. She frowned. Who would come at this hour? Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw a tall man struggling with a broken umbrella, his expensive suit soaked through. After a brief hesitation, she opened the door. Wind swept in, carrying the smell of wet pavement. The man stepped inside, shaking the water from his hair. When he lifted his head, Monica froze. He had a sharply defined face, his features resolute but his eyes kind. His voice, deep and slightly hesitant, filled the room. "Sorry for showing up so late. I'm Ethan Whitaker. I tried calling a few times but couldn't reach you. I saw your light on and, well, I took a chance." Monica tightened the cardigan around her shoulders. "What is it you wanted to see me about?" "Riverside Housing," he said, setting a leather briefcase on the table. "I read about it. I was impressed. I'm looking for an architect for a new development my company is launching. But more than that, I wanted to meet the person behind those designs." Monica blinked in surprise. She was used to Richard's mocking tone whenever she spoke about her work. Now, hearing genuine respect from a stranger, a successful businessman no less, left her uncertain how to respond. "You know about Riverside?" Ethan smiled, his eyes brightening. More than no. I visited. I saw the children playing in the courtyard and the small gardens where the single mothers tended. That's not just architecture. Monica, that's community. And I want to work with someone who understands that. Her heart pounded. This could be the chance she'd been waiting for, but part of her hesitated. Things that sound too good often aren't real. Ethan didn't push. He strolled around the studio, studying the sketches pinned to the walls. His manner wasn't that of an executive judging an applicant, but of someone genuinely curious. "What's this one?" he asked, pointing to a rough sketch, a housing complex with inner courtyards and green rooftops. "Just an idea," Monica said, a little self-conscious. "A place dense enough for the city, but still safe, still human. No one's interested, though." "That's a shame," Ethan said, his gaze lingering on the drawing. "Because I think it's wonderful. It could become something real." Monica gave a wry laugh. "You don't know the market. Developers don't care about playgrounds or sunlight. They want glass towers and profit margins." Ethan turned to her, his eyes steady. "I'm not like them. My company works in clean energy and sustainable development. I want buildings that mean something, not just make money. And I want you, the woman who turned an abandoned lot into a place people call home, to help me build them." Since her divorce, few people had ever described her as the woman who made something happen. Her throat tightened. She could only nod. They sat together, drinking black coffee from a sputtering old machine. Outside, the storm raged on, but the conversation flowed easily inside. Monica spoke about her belief that architecture wasn't just to be looked at, it was meant to be lived in. Ethan listened closely, asking thoughtful questions rather than talking over her. That night, as he left, Monica stood in the doorway watching him disappear into the rain. Inside her rose a strange mix of emotions, hope and fear. Hope was because someone finally believed in her vision. Fear was because she wasn't sure she deserved that faith. She didn't know it then, but that night marked the beginning of something that would change her life forever. Ethan began showing up at Alvarez Design more often in the following weeks. At first, he came as a client discussing plans, reviewing drafts, but slowly, the boundary between work and life blurred. Monica found he wasn't like the business people she'd known during her years with Richard. He didn't flaunt wealth or talk down to her. When she explained technical details, he listened, sometimes even took notes. For the first time, Monica felt that her voice truly mattered. One late night, they were still in the office, debating how to bring natural light into the new housing layout. The fluorescent bulb flickered, and Ethan laughed. "You know," he said, "I used to think architects drew pretty buildings, but listening to you, I get it now. Architecture can heal." Monica looked up, meeting his gaze. For a long moment, the distance between them felt almost gone. 3 months passed like that. Meetings turned into long talks about childhood and dreams. Monica told him about growing up in an immigrant family in Queens, always fighting to prove her worth. Ethan told her about his mother, a widow who'd worked herself to the bone so he could study. One Sunday afternoon, he invited Monica and her sons to a picnic at Riverside Park. Daniel brought a toy airplane with a broken wing and grew frustrated when he couldn't fix it. Monica tensed, remembering how Richard used to snap at such things. But Ethan knelt in the grass beside Daniel, patient and gentle. "Sometimes," he said, "things that break just need to be seen from another angle. You don't throw them away, you find a new way to make them fly." Daniel's eyes lit up as the plane finally lifted off, gliding low over the grass. Lucas cheered. Monica watched quietly, her heart expanding. In that moment, she glimpsed a new vision of family, not a place of endurance but belonging. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep in the back seat, Ethan drove Monica home to her small Brooklyn apartment. He didn't rush to leave. Standing under the soft glow of the streetlight, he brushed a loose strand of hair from her forehead and whispered, "I need to say this. It stopped being just business a while ago. Monica, I love you." She froze. Love had once been a word Richard used as a leash, a tool to control and wound. But in Ethan's voice, it was a promise, gentle and unforced. She whispered back, "I love you too." And when he kissed her, it wasn't a kiss of possession, it was one of reverence. A year later, their bond had only deepened. Ethan had become Monica's partner and a true father to Daniel and Lucas. He helped with homework, flipped pancakes on Sunday mornings, and told bedtime stories that ended in laughter instead of fear. For the first time, when Monica heard her sons call someone daddy, it brought joy, not pain. She knew the past would always linger somewhere behind her, but now it was only a shadow because Ethan and the two boys they loved had filled her life with a new kind of light, the light of a real family. It was a crisp, late autumn morning, unusually clear for New York. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of Alvarez design, bathing the studio in gold. On the wall hung the blueprints of Brooklyn green homes, and beside them a photo from the grand opening of the Calloway Cultural Center. Hundreds of smiling residents gathered beneath its glass dome. When Ethan walked in, Monica was reviewing design plans, carrying a leather folder. Unlike his usual cheerful self, he wore a quiet expression, something solemn yet tender. "I have something to show you," he said, placing the folder on her desk. Curious, Monica opened it. Inside wasn't a contract, but a carefully arranged photo album. The first page showed the Calloway Cultural Center at dusk, bathed in golden light as children ran across the steps. Monica blinked in surprise. Ethan turned the page. An aerial photo of Brooklyn green homes, its green rooftops tucked among busy streets. Then, another Harlem public library. After renovation, sunlight streams through expansive windows onto rows of children reading. "I've kept track of every project you've built," Ethan said softly. "Not just the buildings, but the lives inside them." Each page held a handwritten note. "Thank you." Letters from a single mother who'd received affordable housing, from an older man who'd found joy again at the library, from a group of teenagers learning construction skills at a community center. Monica's eyes filled with tears. The words were simple but deeply human. "Because of this home, my daughter finally has a desk to study at. Thank you for giving us a place where we belong." She closed the album, her hands trembling. "You kept all of this?" Ethan nodded. "Because I knew someday you'd need a reminder that you don't just exist, Monica. You make a difference." Her breath caught. For years, she had battled the echo of Richard's voice. "You're just pretending. You'll never make it." But here, before her, was the truth. Hundreds of lives changed because she had dared to keep building. Ethan knelt and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a platinum ring gleamed, elegant and straightforward. "Monica Alvarez," he said, his voice steady, low, full of love. "You've built worlds for others, but I want to build a home with you. Will you marry me?" The room fell silent, the only sound her heartbeat drumming in her ears. Before she could speak, Ethan looked up again, eyes warm but serious. "There's one condition," he said gently. "I'm not just proposing to you. I'm proposing to Daniel and Lucas, too. Because I don't only want to be your husband, I want to be their father. Officially, completely." Monica broke into tears. No one had ever said words like that to her. Just then, laughter echoed from the loft above. The boys had come home from school, still wearing backpacks. Ethan turned, lifted the ring, and said, "Boys, Daddy's got something to ask. Daddy loves your mama, and Daddy loves you both, too. I want to be your real dad, to make us a true family. What do you say? Can I marry your mama?" Daniel looked at Lucas, their eyes sparkling. Then they nodded at once. Lucas shouted, "Yes, but only if Daddy keeps making Sunday pancakes." Ethan laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Deal. Every Sunday enough pancakes for everyone." Monica pulled them all into her arms, feeling the old wounds inside her begin to close. In that embrace, she was no longer the woman Richard had abandoned. She was a mother, a partner, and a woman loved with respect. In that moment, Alvarez Design stopped being just a workplace. It became the stage for a quiet, sacred celebration of family. Daniel and Lucas clung to Ethan, their faces glowing with pure joy. Monica watched her three boys and felt her heart warmer than any fire. Just then, Tasha stepped through the door and froze at the sight. Then she smiled brightly, raised her phone, and snapped a photo. "Now this," she said, "is your greatest design yet. Monica, a family." The room was filled with laughter. In the following days, the proposal became a turning point in love and Monica's confidence. She walked into meetings with a new poise. no longer hesitant, but grounded. She knew that her family, passion, and faith stood behind her. Daniel and Lucas changed, too. At school, they proudly told everyone they were getting a real daddy. When asked to write an essay about their hero, both chose Ethan, the man who helped me fix my Lego plane, the man who reads us stories, the man who protects Mama. Monica read those words at the kitchen table, tears falling onto the paper. Ethan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered, "I don't need any medal. This is the only reward I'll ever want." One winter evening, snow drifted past the windows of their apartment. The family sat around the fireplace. Lucas, clutching a pillow, looked up earnestly. "Daddy, if I call you Dad at school, will people laugh?" Ethan pulled him close. "No, son, and if they do, I'll tell them this. Being a father isn't about blood, it's about love. And I love you both with everything I have." Daniel said, "Then, you'll be there when we graduate, right?" "I'll be there," Ethan said, looking them both in the eye. "At every milestone, every dream. That's a promise." Monica watched them, peace flooding her heart. The scars of her past remained, but for the first time, they no longer hurt. They were proof of survival. Weeks later, Ethan officially filed for adoption. The legal process was slow, but he pursued it with unwavering patience. Monica worried that Richard might interfere, but the lawyer assured her that Richard had long ago signed away his parental rights to avoid child support. The day the court approved the adoption, Daniel and Lucas ran to Ethan, shouting, "You're our real daddy." Their laughter filled the marble hallway, even making the judge smile. Monica squeezed Ethan's hand and whispered, "You just gave them a future I never thought they'd have." He replied softly, "They gave me a reason to live for one." That night, they gathered around their old wooden kitchen table, mismatched plates, warm food, laughter spilling across the room. Monica looked around and realized this was home. Not the mansion she once lived in, not luxury or wealth, just love. But even in that joy, she couldn't forget the shadow of the past. The gilded envelope from Richard still hung on the refrigerator, a silent reminder that a reckoning awaited. She took a deep breath, looking at Ethan, then at her sons, and in their eyes, steady, bright, and full of love, she knew. This time, she would not face it alone. The day of the gala was drawing near. Across New York, the gold-embossed invitations from the Calloway Foundation had become coveted tokens passes into one of the city's most glittering events of the year. Society pages buzzed with anticipation, calling it the evening of the elite, promising appearances from politicians, magnates, and stars. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Monica sat on a wooden chair in her studio, holding the invitation in both hands. She had read it so many times she could recite it by heart, yet it still felt as heavy as stone. Ethan entered, wearing a long coat and carrying the street's chill. He caught the distant look in her eyes and smiled reassuringly. "I've been thinking," he said. "We're not walking into that place as victims. We're walking in as a family, confident, unafraid. You won't be standing in Richard's shadow anymore." Monica nodded slowly. Her silence wasn't fear of Richard himself, but of the eyes that would watch her, the pitying smiles, the whispered judgments, the woman who fell from privilege. The memories of humiliation were ghosts that still lingered. "Come with me to Fifth Avenue," Ethan said, gently pulling her hand. "Someone is waiting for you." The boutique stood on a quiet, elegant corner. Its tall glass facade reflected the city lights like liquid silver. Inside, chandeliers glowed above graceful attendants dressed in black, moving with dancer's precision. Monica hesitated before stepping in, her heart quickening. "Ethan, this is too much. I have old dresses that will do just fine. You don't have to." He interrupted with a quiet smile. "This isn't about fitting in this time, Monica. It's about standing out. I want you to walk into that room as the woman you truly are, the one who rebuilt communities, not the one he tried to break." A poised, silver-haired woman approached, smiling warmly. "Mr. Whitaker, everything is ready, and you must be..." "Monica, what a pleasure. I'm Elena Marchetti." Elena, one of New York's most renowned designers, led Monica into a private fitting room. Rows of exquisite gowns awaited, each elegant without being ostentatious. Monica's fingers brushed the fabric of a deep, midnight blue gown, soft and fluid as water. Elena explained. Ethan said, that I insisted on this color. I told her it's the shade your eyes take on when discussing your work. Monica froze, glancing at him. Ethan only shrugged with that gentle grin. It's true. When Monica stepped out wearing the dress, Ethan and Elena fell silent. The gown fit her perfectly graceful, commanding, understated. Monica looked at her reflection in the three-way mirror and felt something shift. The woman staring back wasn't the cheap immigrant girl Richard had sneered at. She was an accomplished architect, a mother, a woman who had survived and thrived. Ethan stepped closer, lifted her hand, and kissed the engagement ring. Perfect, he whispered. That's the real you. When Elena quietly left them alone, Ethan's expression changed. He took her hand, his voice suddenly serious. There's something you need to know before that night. Monica's heart tightened. What is it? He took a slow breath, as if he had rehearsed this moment. Some of your biggest projects, they didn't come to you entirely by chance. The Morrison Cultural Center, the Harlem Library, and the West Side Housing Project were initiated through satellite companies I founded. I didn't interfere with the bidding, but I ensured the opportunity existed for you to show what you could do. The room fell silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. Monica stepped back, her expression stunned, wounded. You hid this from me? Ethan nodded, guilt in his voice. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't just stand by watching you struggle to break through, not when I had the power to open a door. Everything after that, all the designs, the leadership, the success that was you, I just laid the first stone. Monica turned to the mirror again. For a moment, the reflection no longer looked powerful, only uncertain. Was her success truly her own or just another man's mercy dressed up as fate? Her voice trembled. Ethan, I spent years fighting to escape a man who wanted to control every part of my life. I'm afraid you might be doing the same, only more gently. Ethan froze, then moved closer, keeping a respectful distance. I'm not trying to control you, he said quietly. I'm trying to protect you. If I made a mistake, it hurts to see you struggle because I love you so much. But Monica, look at what you've built. Look at those families, those homes. That's your work. You changed lives. She was silent, the echo of Richard's voice whispering in her memory. You could never do anything without me. But Ethan wasn't Richard. He hadn't mocked her, demanded gratitude, or sought dominance. He waited for her to believe him. Tears welled in Monica's eyes. She stepped forward and placed her palm against his cheek. I'm angry that you didn't tell me. But I know you're not like him. I know you did it out of love. Promise me next time we make those choices together. Ethan clasped her hand. I promise. No more secrets. From now on, we will take every step side by side. Monica smiled faintly through her tears. The reflection of two people holding each other in the mirror looked more substantial than any shadow behind them. Later, they sat quietly in the car outside the boutique. Fifth Avenue sparkled beyond the windshield, but the stillness felt sacred inside. Monica exhaled, feeling the strange mix of heaviness and relief. Knowing the truth hurt, but so did knowing it came from love, not control. I'll wear the dress, she said finally, not to impress him, but to remind myself I'm not that woman anymore. Ethan turned to her, eyes soft with pride. And I'll be beside you, every moment. While Monica prepared with love and resolve, Richard Calloway was preparing too in a very different way. The long dining table had become a war room in his Manhattan penthouse. Dozens of photographs of Monica lay spread across its glossy surface. Her leaving the office late, her simple coat on the street, her with her sons on a school morning. Even confidential financial records lay open. Richard stood with arms crossed, eyes cold. These will be my proof. She's not a visionary architect, just a lucky charity case. That's the story I'll tell them. Chloe Grant, his assistant, clutched her notepad nervously. Mr. Calloway, I think that could backfire. Many guests know her work well. If you go too far— Silence, his voice cut through the room. I've lived among these people my entire life. I know what they crave, a redemption story. A fallen woman saved by grace. and I'll give them that on my terms." Chloe pressed her lips together. She couldn't tell whether she was watching a calculated plan or the unraveling of a man consumed by obsession. Across the river in Brooklyn, the air felt lighter. That evening, Monica sat with Daniel and Lucas, discussing the gala. The boys were excitedly buzzing, as if it were a school pageant. "Mama's going to look like a princess," Lucas shouted, his eyes wide. "No," Daniel corrected solemnly. "She's a queen, and we're her knights." Monica laughed, pulling them both close. "Just be yourselves, my brave knights. That's all the strength I'll ever need." Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching quietly. At that moment, he understood that Richard might have money and power, but he would never have this a real family. 2 days before the gala, Monica received a text from an unknown number. Just one line: "Be ready. He's not just planning to humiliate you, he wants to eradicate your reputation." A chill ran through her. She handed the phone to Ethan, whose jaw tightened. He immediately called his security team. "From now until the gala, there'll be protection around you and the kids. I won't give him a chance." Monica's voice trembled slightly. "Ethan, I don't want this to become a war." "It isn't your war," he said firmly. "It's his obsession. But I won't let him make you a victim again." The family gathered around the small kitchen table the night before the gala. Ethan cooked his famous pasta chaotic, smoky, slightly oversalted, but it was a feast to the boys. After dinner, Monica tucked the children into bed. When she returned, Ethan was sitting on the couch, lost in thought. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That tomorrow changes everything," he said. "Not because of Richard, but because tomorrow you'll stand before the world, no longer as the shadow in his story, but as Monica Alvarez, the woman who wrote her own." Monica sat beside him. "And you?" He smiled faintly. Just the lucky man standing next to her. They sat in silence, hands intertwined. Outside, the city pulsed with sleepless light. But in their Brooklyn apartment, there was only one truth left. Tomorrow, they would walk back into the house that once symbolized her captivity and turn it into the stage of her freedom. On a clear Saturday afternoon, the skies over Long Island gleamed a rare shade of blue. The Calloway estate, its marble columns gleaming in the low sun, stood like a monument to wealth and pride. The stone driveway glittered with luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls, Royces, sleek Cadillacs polished to mirror sheen. Rows of oak trees lined the path, strung with twinkling lights, creating a spectacle both opulent and excessive. A black limousine glided through the gates. Inside, Monica sat with her hands clasped tightly over the folds of her midnight blue gown. Daniel and Lucas sat on either side of her, both in small tuxedos, their hair neatly combed, their faces glowing with awe and excitement. "Mama, you really look like a princess," Lucas whispered, his voice full of wonder. Monica smiled, squeezing his hand. "No, sweetheart, I'm just your mama, and I've got 2 little princes beside me." Across from them, Ethan took her hand, a firm, steady grip that grounded her. "You're not a princess or a queen," he said softly. "You're you, and that's what makes you shine." The car rolled to a stop before the grand red carpet that led to the mansion's entrance. Flashes burst from both sides, photographers crowding, their cameras firing like lightning. Ethan stepped out, immaculate in a black tuxedo, calm and poised. He turned and offered his hand to Monica. The crowd hushed as she emerged. The deep blue gown shimmered beneath the spotlights, flowing around her like a river of stars. Her sons stepped out next, small hands gripping hers, chins lifted high. The image they made was breathtaking, not one of pity, but of pride and quiet strength. The reporters swarmed. "Mr. Whitaker, is this your fiancée? Who is she?" "The architect everyone's been talking about, Monica Alvarez." Ethan smiled, his voice composed. "Yes, this is my fiancée, Monica Alvarez, and these are our sons, Daniel and Lucas." The cameras erupted again, flashes exploding like fireworks. Monica felt the dazzle, the noise, the weight of hundreds of eyes, but calm returned when she looked at Ethan and the boys. She wasn't walking alone. Inside, the grand hall glittered under chandeliers as vast as constellations. Marble floors shone like water, every step reflected in their polish. Tables draped in white linen encircled the stage, each adorned with lilies and silver candles. Monica paused at the threshold. Every column, every window held memories, some sweet, most searing. Ethan leaned close, his breath warm by her ear. Breathe. This isn't his house anymore. It's just a building. The power is yours now. She nodded, straightened her back, and walked forward. Daniel and Lucas clung to her hands, small but fierce. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Many recognized her, the architect behind the projects the city couldn't stop talking about. An older woman approached, eyes shining. "You're Monica Alvarez? I'm Elaine Parker, director of the Calloway Cultural Center. Your design changed our community. I don't have words except thank you." Monica squeezed her hand, her voice soft. "I only drew the lines. The people living there gave it life." Ethan watched, pride flickering in his eyes. With each conversation and each handshake, Monica realized she didn't belong here as an outsider anymore. She had earned her place. At the far end of the room, Richard Calloway watched. Dressed in an Armani tuxedo, glass of champagne in hand, he looked every bit the gracious host. But when his gaze fell on Monica, his fingers tightened around the stem. He had imagined her arriving nervous, fragile, diminished. Instead, she stood radiant, poised, with Ethan Whitaker, the respected billionaire, beside her, and two boys who called him Daddy. A burn of rage flared in his chest, but he masked it with a smile, whispering, "Not yet. Let's see how long she keeps smiling." The soft strains of jazz filled the air, violin and saxophone weaving through the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. For most, it was a night to display wealth and connections. For Monica, it was a reckoning with the past. Her table sat near the stage, a deliberate placement by Richard. Under the chandelier's spotlight, she knew exactly what he intended, to make her visible, vulnerable. She felt the stares, some curious, some admiring, others edged with envy. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Mama, why's everyone looking at us?" Monica bent down, smiling. "Because you and your brother look too handsome for this room. That's why." Lucas giggled, the tension at their table easing. Ethan's hand rested gently on her back, a silent reminder, "I'm here." Across the hall, Richard moved among guests, his charm polished to perfection. He laughed, toasted, and exchanged practiced words with politicians and investors. But his eyes never left Monica's table. Every word of his speech was rehearsed, every pause calibrated. Tonight, he would turn her into his symbol of gracious pity. Chloe Grant hovered nearby, clipboard in hand, worry etched across her face. She had wanted to warn and stop him, but fear held her tongue each time she saw the steely glint in his eyes. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching a slow-motion disaster. Dinner began. Delicate scallops, smoked salmon, and French wine were poured with flourish. Daniel and Lucas fumbled with their silverware, and Ethan quietly showed them how to hold their knives, smiling patiently. Guests nearby stole glances, surprised to see one of New York's most powerful men tenderly teaching two boys table manners. A silver-haired woman across from them leaned forward. "You must be Monica Alvarez. I read about Brooklyn Green Homes. Truly inspiring work." Monica hesitated, then smiled. "It was a community effort. I only drew the plans. The people gave it meaning." The woman nodded. "When an architect says that, I know she builds more than walls. She builds hope." The words settled warmly in Monica's chest. Perhaps tonight wouldn't be the trap Richard had planned, but something far greater. The lights dimmed. The event host stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? It's time for the evening's keynote speech by the founder of the Calloway Foundation, Mr. Richard Calloway." Polite applause rippled through the hall. Richard stepped into the light, adjusting his tie, his smile broad and hollow. He spread his arms like a man greeting his empire. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice rich and smooth. "This evening, we honor resilience, the strength to turn hardship into triumph." He paused, letting the words sink in, then looked directly at Monica. "And there's someone here tonight who embodies that spirit." The crowd murmured. Monica's pulse quickened. Ethan's hand tightened around hers. Daniel and Lucas sat frozen, sensing the weight in the air. 3 years ago, Richard continued, his tone dripping with false sympathy, I watched a woman fall to near ruin, alone, with 2 children, no career, no support. Many thought she would never recover, but through sheer will she survived. Barely enough to get by, barely enough to keep her dignity. He lifted his glass, the gleam in his eyes triumphant. So please, join me in recognizing Monica Alvarez as a shining example of courage in adversity. The room went still. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Richard's smile widened. The moment he'd imagined was finally here. Monica inhaled slowly. She could feel every gaze, every whisper. The old ghost stirred the fear, the shame, but beside her were the steady fingers of Ethan, the trusting eyes of her sons, the life she had built from nothing. She rose, her spine straight, and her voice calm and clear. Thank you, Richard, she said, her words carrying effortlessly across the room. But I think you've left out a few details. A ripple of surprise swept through the guests. Ethan gave a slight nod. Richard's grin faltered. Yes, Monica continued, I did leave this place with nothing but my children and my will, but I didn't just survive. I built. I designed the Calloway Cultural Center, a national award-winning project. I developed Brooklyn Green Homes, a model for sustainable living now studied across the country. And I built a family rooted not in wealth, but in love. Applause broke out, hesitant initially, then swelling, strong and unstoppable. Monica turned, taking Ethan's and the boy's hands. This, she said firmly, her voice steady as iron, is the real proof that no one has the right to define another person's worth. Her gaze met Richard's tremendous, unwavering, without hate. No one. Applause thundered beneath the vaulted ceiling, echoing through the marble hall like a living wave. But not every pair of hands joined in. On stage, Richard Calloway stood frozen, champagne glass trembling slightly in his grip, his smile stretched thin. He felt the light turn away from him for the first time toward her. The plan had been simple. He would cast Monica as the redeemed woman, a figure of pity and triumph whose story, conveniently, glorified him as her savior. But with only a few calm sentences, she had reversed the story, reclaimed her dignity, and stolen the stage he'd built for himself. Richard lifted his glass again, forcing a laugh. Remarkable, truly remarkable. Monica, I see you've learned to perform, but let's not forget. Every project you mentioned, he paused, sweeping his gaze across the room, was only possible because powerful men believed in you. Without their support, would you really be standing here tonight? A chill rippled through the hall. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. No one was accustomed to hearing personal attacks at a charity gala. Monica didn't flinch. Her pulse was steady now, her fear long gone. When she spoke, her voice was clear and sure. You're right, she said. I was trusted, but that trust didn't come because I was Richard Calloway's ex-wife. It came from the people who live in the homes I designed, from families who found hope in places I helped rebuild. The only support I've ever relied on is their belief that I could make a difference. Applause broke out again, stronger this time, filling the silence with warmth. A few guests nodded in agreement. Richard felt sweat dampen his collar. He tightened his grip on the glass. Don't fool yourself, Monica. Yes, you have a few projects, but compared to what I've built, the towers that define Manhattan, they're nothing more than decoration. Ethan rose beside her, one hand resting on her shoulder. His voice was calm but resonant, and he cut clean through the noise. Decoration? He said evenly. I've seen children reading under the lights of a library she designed. I've walked through housing where single mothers grow food on rooftops to feed their families. If that's what you call decoration, then tell me what tower of yours has ever saved a life? The hall went dead silent. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. All around him, faces turned not with admiration, but disapproval. Monica looked at Ethan, gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time, she understood she wasn't standing alone. She had him, her sons, and the hundreds of people whose lives had touched hers. She drew a breath and turned back to Richard. You know, Richard, she said softly, I used to believe you when you told me I was nothing without you. But the truth is, I've never been stronger than I am now, after you left. The applause came again, loud and unstoppable, like surf breaking against stone. Some guests even rose to their feet. Richard's face darkened. His hand slammed the glass onto the podium with a crack. You dare say that here? After everything I gave you, the house, the status, the money, this is how you repay me? By turning me into the villain in my own home? A sharp task sounded from the front row. Margaret Holloway, a respected philanthropist, raised her glass with remarkable poise. No one needs lessons on gratitude from you, Richard. I just heard a woman talk about building community. I didn't hear a word of that from you. Murmurs swept through the room. Richard felt the ground tilt beneath him. The empire of image he'd built for decades was crumbling, one quiet look at a time. He laughed a hollow, desperate sound. Don't be fooled by this sentimental theater. The world doesn't run on fairy tales. Her so-called success, he spat the word, wasn't built on talent alone. We all know women like her need a patron. The venom in his voice was unmistakable. Guests stiffened. Several frowned. From the front, Daniel's small fist clenched on the tablecloth, his cheeks flushing red. Mama doesn't need anyone's help, he blurted, his voice bright and fierce. Every head turned. Lucas jumped up beside him, eyes blazing. Mama works all night. She draws thousands of papers. She builds houses for kids who don't have anywhere to play. Nobody gives her anything, she does it herself. Gasps, then laughter soft, encouraging. A few guests began to clap. Monica's breath caught. She reached to rest her hands on her son's shoulders, whispering, "Thank you, my loves." Ethan stood then, his voice slicing clean through the stunned silence. You hear that, Richard? Even children see the truth. Monica's success doesn't need defending it, speaks for itself. It's real, tangible, alive in every community she's touched. And you, he took a step closer, eyes hard as glass, you, with all your wealth and power, have come here tonight to tear down the woman who once shared your home. Tell me, what does that say about you? Applause erupted louder than before, echoing like a verdict. Richard's face flushed scarlet. He slammed his palm against the podium. Enough, you're all being deceived. He jabbed a finger toward Ethan, is the real puppet master. Without him, Monica would be nothing. He built her image, funded her contracts, turned her into his puppet so he could parade his own virtue. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. It was a cruel blow, the kind that could plant doubt. Monica's stomach tightened. Her deepest fear was that everyone would believe her success wasn't hers. Before she could speak, Ethan stepped forward, voice steady but fierce. Yes, he said. I used my company to open a few doors. That part is true. But I never touched her designs, never shaped her vision. I did one thing, made sure her voice could be heard. Everything else, every line, every plan, every brick came from her. He turned to the audience, his tone ringing with conviction. You can go to the Holloway Cultural Center and ask the families who gather there. You can visit Brooklyn Green Homes and ask the children who play on its rooftops. They'll tell you whose hands built those dreams. Her name isn't mine. It's Monica Alvarez. The silence that followed was brief then. The hall exploded in applause. Guests stood, clapping, cheering. Some approached Monica's table to shake her hand, to thank her. She stood among them, tears glimmering, but her smile radiant. This wasn't about sponsorship or protection, but love and faith, the difference between control and belief. Across the room, Richard staggered slightly. His final weapon had failed. Those who once courted his favor now looked away. His loyal assistant, Chloe Grant, stood near the wall, shaking her head with quiet disappointment. Richard felt the weight of what he'd built for the first time, an empire of pride, now crumbling under the light of truth. The mansion that had once symbolized his power now felt like a prison, exposing his emptiness. Monica looked at him one last time. There was no anger left, only pity. Her voice was gentle, yet it carried through the entire room. You wanted to prove I was weak, Richard. But all you've proven tonight is yourself, that power isn't money or status. True power is the ability to build, not destroy. The applause that followed was thunderous, rolling like judgment through the marble hall. Richard stood alone beneath the lights, his empire of control disintegrating before a woman he could no longer diminish. The applause thundered and rolled across the grand hall, then slowly ebbed into a wary silence. But Richard Calloway did not bow, nor yield. Instead, a sharp, brittle laugh broke from his throat, echoing through the marble chamber like shattering glass. "How touching," he sneered. "A perfect little family fairy tale. But you all seem to have forgotten one thing: I still own this house, and under this roof, my word is law." The crowd quieted at once, an uneasy tremor rippling through the room. Guests glanced at one another, sensing the thin crack in his composure widening. Monica did not sit. She stood tall, eyes locked on him. "This house is only stone and wood, Richard. The power you think you hold vanished the day you chose to tear people down instead of lifting them." Her words struck like a clean blade. Richard's face flushed scarlet. He stepped down from the stage, moving toward her table. The event's security guards tensed, but Ethan raised a calm hand. "Let him come," he said quietly, his tone steady, commanding. Richard stopped just short of Monica, his breath ragged. "You think you've won? Don't forget. I know everything about you, every weakness. I can expose it all. I've got files, financial records, and photos. One call from me and your precious reputation will burn to ash." Murmurs rippled through the guests. The wealthy in attendance knew the ugliness that often lurked behind success, but few had ever seen it dragged so nakedly into the light. Monica's voice remained even. "You have no power left, Richard. What you hold in your hand is nothing but scraps of the past. The present and the future are no longer yours to touch." Ethan rose, towering over Richard, his eyes sharp as glass. "She's right. And in case you've forgotten, you signed away your parental rights 2 years ago. Daniel and Lucas are not your sons anymore. They're mine." A collective gasp swept the room. The boys looked up, eyes wide, then stood beside their mother. Daniel spoke first, his small voice trembling but firm. "Mama doesn't need you, and neither do we." Lucas lifted his chin, his tone clear as a bell. "Daddy is our daddy, not you." The word daddy hung in the air, pure, unyielding, and heavy as a hammer. Silence followed, absolute and crushing. Richard stood frozen, his face twisting between fury and humiliation. From the corner of the hall, Tasha Coleman, Monica's assistant, stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice calm but firm, "but I think it's time a few truths came to light." Every eye turned to her. Tasha placed the folder on the table. "The documents Mr. Calloway planned to use as blackmail," she said evenly, "are evidence of his misuse of foundation funds for personal gain. I've kept them safe, knowing this day would come." A collective murmur swept the room. Richard went pale. He lunged for the folder, but Ethan caught his arm in a grip of steel. "Don't," he said quietly. "Not here. Not tonight. Everyone in this room is watching." Richard's breathing turned ragged. For the first time, he realized he was trapped. The trap he'd built for Monica had closed around him instead, and the witnesses were countless. Monica stepped forward, her voice calm, unwavering. "You once told me I was invisible, but tonight everyone sees me. And they see you too, not the man you pretend to be, but the man you really are, someone who only knows how to destroy." Applause broke again, firm and final. It was not polite now, it was a judgment. Richard staggered backward, hate and disbelief mingling on his face. Again, the room was noisy, chairs scraping, hushed voices, and the rumble of change. Richard Calloway stood at the center of it, pale and trembling, stripped of the control that had defined his life. Chloe Grant, his longtime assistant, stepped forward, her voice small but resolute. "Mr. Calloway, enough. You've gone too far. If you keep this up, people won't just lose respect for you. They'll turn away completely." Richard spun toward her, shouting, "You stay out of this. You betray me too." Chloe did not flinch. "I'm not betraying you, sir. I'm choosing the truth. And the truth is, you've abused everything. Money, power, and people." The hall fell utterly still. This was no longer a domestic quarrel. It was the public collapse of a man who had believed himself untouchable. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "Richard, you thought you could destroy her, but all you've done is destroy yourself. You keep calling this your house, but the truth is, It hasn't been yours for months. I bought it from the bank 3 months ago. You're standing in a building you no longer own. The room erupted. Heads turned. Voices rose. Richard's face contorted in disbelief. You're lying, he stammered. Ethan reached into his jacket, drew out a folder, and laid it on the table. The deed, he said. You defaulted on your loans. The bank sold the property. I purchased it. And after tonight, this place won't be a stage for ego, it'll be a community center. A place where children can learn and grow instead of watching adults destroy each other. Applause exploded, unrestrained this time, full of approval and relief. Many guests stood, clapping, nodding toward Monica and Ethan with admiration. Richard's hand trembled as he pointed at Monica. You planned this. You wanted to take everything from me. Monica shook her head slowly. There was no anger now, only quiet sorrow. No, Richard. I never wanted to take anything. I only wanted freedom. You left me, left our children. I moved on. You're the one who stayed trapped in your hate. Daniel stepped forward again, voice shaking but brave. Mama doesn't need anything from you. Lucas and I don't either. We already have a daddy, a real one. He loves Mama, and he loves us. That's what a family is. Lucas gripped his brother's hand. You only gave us your blood, but Daddy gave us his heart, and hearts are stronger than blood. A hush swept through the room. Several women wiped their eyes. Older men nodded, faces somber with respect. Richard staggered back, color draining from his face. The applause that followed was thunderous, but not for him. In the hall's center stood Monica, Ethan, Daniel, and Lucas, hands clasped, radiant under the light. Monica felt truly seen for the first time, not as Richard Calloway's ex-wife, but as herself. She turned to him one last time, her voice calm and clear. You once said I was invisible, but tonight everyone sees me, and they see you. In the end, Richard, the truth always wins. The applause swelled again, steady, relentless, like waves washing away the last fragments of his empire. Richard Calloway stood alone, small and hollow in the house that had once been his fortress, and as the lights glimmered against his ashen face, everyone knew that Richard Calloway's empire had fallen right where he once believed himself invincible. After the storm of confrontation, the grand hall fell into a thick, breathless silence. Everyone knew they had just witnessed more than a domestic dispute. They had seen the public collapse of a man once considered untouchable. The chandeliers still glittered overhead, but the light no longer warmed the room. It now felt like a courtroom, and Richard Calloway stood at the center of its judgment. Once the symbol of wealth and control, Richard looked like a stranger in his house. His tuxedo, once immaculate, was creased and stained. The glass in his hand trembled, the amber liquid rippling with his unsteady breath. Then, Chloe Grant, his longtime assistant, stepped toward the podium. Her hands shook at first, but her voice found its strength. Ladies and gentlemen, I've worked for Mr. Calloway for years. I believed in the image he built, the successful businessman, the philanthropist. But tonight, I can't stay silent any longer. Murmurs rippled through the room. Chloe opened the folder that Tasha Coleman had handed her earlier. These are the Calloway Foundation's financial statements. Over $2 million to fund housing for people experiencing homelessness was funneled into shell companies owned by Mr. Calloway himself. I stayed quiet because I was afraid. But watching him try to use those same lies to humiliate his ex-wife and his children, I can't be complicit anymore. Gasps filled the room. Guests exchanged horrified looks. Some quietly left their seats, unwilling to be seen as part of this spectacle. Richard's voice cracked as he shouted, "You dare! You're paid with my money, Chloe. Who will believe a frightened little assistant?" But his words fell flat, brittle, and hollow. Chloe lifted her chin. They'll believe me because I have the evidence, and because the truth always finds its way to the light. Ethan stepped forward and took the microphone. His voice carried calm, resonant, and confident. You've all seen it now. This isn't just about a failed marriage. It's about how power can be twisted to control, to humiliate. But it's also about how real strength is found not in domination but creation. He turned toward Monica, his tone softening. She didn't need anyone to hand her success. Monica built it, One sketch, one beam, one late night at a time. I'm just the man lucky enough to walk beside her and to protect this family. Applause erupted, full and sustained. Monica rose and stepped into the circle of light. The deep blue of her gown shimmered, but what held the room was not the fabric, it was her posture, proud and steady. She looked around, voice clear and firm. Tonight, he tried to turn me into a story of pity, but that's not who I am. I'm a mother, an architect, a woman who learned to stand after being told I was nothing. And I want to say this to anyone who has ever been made to feel invisible. You don't need anyone's permission to exist. You don't need the approval of those who tear you down. You are enough, and you always have been. The room trembled with emotion. People who had come merely for social display now sat forward, listening intently. A few nodded, others wiped their eyes. Daniel and Lucas ran to her, gripping her hands. In his bright, honest voice, Lucas declared, "Mama's not a sad story. Mama's our hero." The hall erupted in thunderous applause, a standing ovation that refused to end. In the corner, Richard looked shrunken, pitiful. For the first time in his life, he had nowhere to hide. The glitter of the chandeliers could not disguise his fall. Margaret Holloway, a respected philanthropist, stood and tapped her glass for attention. Her voice carried clearly, "I've attended countless galas, but rarely have I witnessed truth spoken this plainly. Monica Alvarez, you are not just a guest tonight. You are proof that courage and integrity can transform an entire room." "Bravo," someone shouted, and the crowd joined in wave after wave of applause. Monica bowed her head slightly, gratitude glistening in her eyes. In the corner, Richard tried once more to salvage himself. He snatched a microphone, his tone sharp and desperate. "You think she's a hero? Don't forget, I can expose every dirty secret. I know how she got those contracts. I know." A voice cut across his calm, male, steady. "No, Mr. Calloway, you don't know, but we do." It came from a young businessman in the crowd, one of Monica's collaborators. He stepped forward, holding photos of ribbon cuttings, articles, and letters of thanks. "I worked with her. Every project was transparent. There were no favors, no schemes, only skill and heart." Others stood. Dr. Marisol Rivera, director of a children's clinic, said, "She designed our pediatric wing. The children aren't afraid of hospitals anymore. Her work doesn't boast it heals." Voices rose from every corner. A conductor spoke of her cultural center, where immigrant children learned music. A teacher described the Harlem Library she had redesigned, where students now study late into the evening. Each testimony became a brick in the wall of truth, a wall Richard could never tear down. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, final, a death knell. Richard looked around wildly for allies, but saw only cold, distant faces. The hands that once reached for him now drew back. Monica watched him. There was no anger left, only pity. "You thought I was weak," she said softly. "But the only weakness here is your fear of facing a world where power can't buy respect." A silence followed, deep, decisive. Then Daniel's small voice broke it. "Mama, let's go home. There's nothing left for us here." Monica smiled gently, stroking his hair. "You're right, sweetheart. Let's go home to where love lives, not hate." Ethan draped her coat over her shoulders, took Daniel and Lucas by the hand, and walked toward the doors together. The applause followed them all the way out, long and unbroken. Behind them, Richard collapsed into a chair, lost in the ruins of his own empire. That night, as their car crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, Monica gazed at the river, the lights glittering like scattered stars. She leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, her arms wrapped around her drowsy son's, and Monica Alvarez felt truly, irrevocably free for the first time in years. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the rooftops of Brooklyn, soft and golden, the kind of light that feels like a promise. Monica woke early, not out of worry or habit, but because peace had nudged her. She stepped out onto the small balcony with a mug of hot coffee. The wind carried the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery. Down below, children rode their bikes, neighbors walked their dogs, and laughter drifted up the street. It was all so ordinary, yet to Monica, it gleamed brighter than any chandelier at the Calloway estate the night before. Behind her, the door opened. Ethan, hair-tousled, still in his robe, came up and wrapped his arms around her from behind. He kissed her hair. "Did you sleep?" he murmured. Monica nodded. "For the first time in years, I slept deeply. No dreams of that house, just us." Ethan smiled, tightening his embrace. "Then it's time to let the past rest." The chaos came from the kitchen spoons clattering, laughter echoing. Monica found Daniel and Lucas waging a pancake war. Batter splattered everywhere. "Daddy said Sunday pancakes are the law." Lucas grinned. Flour streaked across his cheek. Ethan laughed. "The law still stands. But no one ever said the pancakes have to be edible." Laughter filled the kitchen. Monica stood watching them, her family feeling something fuller than victory. Not applause, not headlines, but this: warmth, laughter, home. That afternoon, Monica arrived at Alvarez Design. The whole team was waiting, eyes bright with pride. Tasha stepped forward, holding up the New York Times. On the front page, "Richard Calloway falls at gala, Monica Alvarez rises," as a symbol of strength. Monica read the article slowly. Beneath the headline were the words, "A woman once dismissed as insignificant turned her pain into purpose." Last night, she didn't just stand up for herself, she stood up for everyone who's ever been made to feel small. When Monica looked up, Tasha's eyes glistened. "You did it, Monica. You didn't just win, you gave people hope they could win, too." Later that day, Monica and Ethan drove back to the Calloway estate, now officially theirs. The mansion no longer felt heavy or haunted. It was just a space, waiting to be reborn. Ethan unrolled a set of plans across the old marble table. "I want to turn this place into a community center, a library, art studios, classrooms, open gardens. No more ghosts, only hope." Monica picked up a red pen and began sketching. Her lines were sure and bold. Rooms that once echoed with humiliation would become classrooms. The grand hall that once spotlighted her shame would transform into a stage for children's laughter. "This will no longer be one man's fortress," she said quietly. "It'll be a home for thousands." Ethan looked at her, pride softening his eyes. "And it will be because of you." Months later, spring bloomed across Long Island. The estate was unrecognizable. A new sign stood at the gates: Whitaker Alvarez Community Center. The iron fences were gone, replaced by open gardens. The garage had become a library, the ballroom, a public hall filled with light. On the opening day, the air shimmered with joy. Hundreds gathered, families, children, elders, neighbors. Monica, dressed, stood at the podium under a clear blue sky. She spoke, her voice steady and luminous. "Someone once told me I would never make anything of myself, but today, I stand here to say our worth is not defined by those who belittle us. It's characterized by what we build, what we share, and who we lift along the way. This center isn't about proving I was right, but proving that a community can rise from its wounds." Applause thundered. Daniel and Lucas waved from the front row, shouting, "Mama, you're the best." Monica smiled, tears glinting. She saw herself from 3 years ago, the woman who walked away with nothing but faith, now standing as an architect of hope. That evening, the family sat on the grass behind the center. Daniel and Lucas chatted about their new playground. Ethan leaned back, eyes on the open sky, fingers twined with hers. "I still remember the first time I saw you," he said softly. "That little warehouse office, you were exhausted but never stopped drawing. I knew then you'd build something greater than any skyscraper." Monica rested her head on his shoulder. "And I did, but not alone. I wouldn't have found the strength without you and the boys." Lucas piped up, grinning. "Mama's the queen, Daddy's the knight, and Daniel and I are the guards." Daniel nodded solemnly. "Our family's a fortress. No one can break it." Ethan pulled them close, eyes shining. "That's right. And this fortress isn't built from stone, it's built from love." The last rays of gold washed over the new center as the sun dipped below the horizon. Children's laughter floated in the air. Neighbors shook hands. Elders strolled through the gardens. This wasn't just Monica's triumph. It was a declaration for everyone who'd ever been told they were less, that they could rise, rebuild, and turn the places that once confined them into beacons of light. Monica took Ethan's hand. Ahead of them, Daniel and Lucas ran laughing down the path. The road stretched open, the past behind, the future wide and waiting. And in her heart, a truth rang clear and straightforward. The greatest revenge isn't retribution. It's happiness so radiant that those who once sought to break you lose all power forever.